This is a DMT trip report by Makuna, posted to arrowwood.org on October 14, 2020. I arrived at my friend's apartment just before sunset. The building was 3 stories tall. The third floor held a small balcony that overlooked the city. The air was cool. A gentle breeze brushed my face as I stepped onto the concrete slab. I could see 2 large trees across the street. One stood directly in front of the balcony, its trunk thick and dark, its branches reaching up toward the sky. The other was to my right, its leaves a little sparser, but still imposing. To the left, younger trees rose in a loose line, and a third large tree stretched its branches over the balcony railing, as if trying to touch the space where I stood. White Christmas lights were wrapped around the railing, their soft glow a contrast to the deep purple sky. Charcoal clouds hung low, but a few stars still pierced the darkness, twinkling faintly. I had planned this evening for weeks. I wanted to explore a breakthrough, a state I had only glimpsed before. I set a clear intention before I began. My intention was to see the connections between all things, to feel the flow of consciousness that runs through the world, and to understand my place within that flow. I wanted to be open, to let whatever came be accepted without judgment. I told myself that I would observe, that I would not try to control the experience, that I would simply be a witness. I sat down on a small folding chair, placed my iPod on the balcony railing, and slipped on a pair of headphones. The playlist was already prepared. The first track was Shpongle's Behind Closed Eyelids. I had chosen it because the music has a steady pulse that can act as a guide when the mind begins to move quickly. I pressed play, and the low rhythmic beat began to fill my ears. The bass thumped gently, the synths swirled around it, and the vocal samples floated like distant whispers. The DMT was in a small glass pipe, the crystal clear liquid shimmering in the dim light. My friend had measured out a dose that we both agreed would be enough for a breakthrough. We had used a 0.5 ml vial, each milliliter containing about 30 mg of DMT. I took a deep breath, placed the pipe to my lips, and inhaled. The first rip was smooth, the vapor warm as it entered my lungs. I held the breath for a moment, then exhaled slowly, feeling the smoke linger in the back of my throat. I took a second rip, slightly deeper, and felt the familiar rush that signals the start of a DMT journey. Immediately after the second inhalation, a wave of pressure rose in my chest. It was as if a door inside my body had been opened. My heart beat faster, my breath became shallow, and a bright light seemed to bloom behind my eyes. The music in my headphones grew louder, the beats syncing with the pulse I felt in my throat. I tried to keep my eyes open, but the world outside the balcony began to dissolve into a soft haze. The first thing I noticed was a sense of being pulled outward, away from my physical form. It was not a feeling of fear, but a feeling of expansion. My skin tingled as if every nerve was being stretched like a rubber band. I could hear the distant hum of traffic below, but it sounded far away, as if I were listening from a high hill. The lights on the balcony became points of color, each one a tiny star in a miniature galaxy. The trees on the street turned into silhouettes, their branches forming dark, intricate patterns against the purple sky. I tried to focus on the music. The beat of Shpongle's track seemed to match the rhythm of my own heart. Each drum hit felt like a pulse traveling through my entire body. The synths rose and fell, and with each rise I felt a lift in my spirit. I felt my consciousness begin to separate from my body, to float above it. I could still feel the weight of my shoulders, the pressure of the chair against my back, but those sensations were now distant, like a memory. As the vapor continued to work its way through my system, I sensed a sudden rush of energy. It was as if a spark had ignited in the center of my chest and then exploded outward, filling the space around me with light. I could see strands of light weaving through the air, forming a web that connected everything I could perceive. The web pulsed with the beat of the music, each pulse sending a ripple across the pattern. I felt a presence, not a single being but a collective awareness. It was as if I could hear the thoughts of the people in the room behind me, the thoughts of the city below, the thoughts of the trees across the street. I could sense the consciousness of my friends, even those I had not seen in years. Their memories flickered like brief images in my mind, a laugh here, a shared joke there. I could also sense the consciousness of strangers walking on the sidewalks far below, each one carrying their own story, their own worries. The feeling of being both the smallest atom and the entire universe was overwhelming. I could feel the motion of particles in my own body, the beating of my heart, and at the same time I could see the rotation of distant galaxies. My mind tried to grasp this duality, but the images kept shifting. I imagined my own spiral arms spreading outward, touching the edges of distant stars, while also feeling the tiny vibrations of the blood flowing through my veins. The music changed subtly, a new layer of sound appearing, a high-pitched tone that seemed to vibrate in my skull. It was like a signal, a call to pay attention. I turned my mental focus to the trees that were visible from the balcony. The tree directly in front of me grew taller, its bark becoming a luminous surface, its leaves turning into shimmering panels of light. The tree to my right seemed to breathe, its branches expanding and contracting as if inhaling and exhaling. The larger tree that stretched over the railing became a gateway, a portal framed by its glowing limbs. I felt an urge to move toward that portal, even though my physical body was still seated. In my mind's eye, I stepped through the space between the branches, and the world changed instantly. I was no longer on the balcony, but inside a vast, open field of color. The field was made of shifting patterns, each one a different hue, moving like a liquid. The colors were not static, they flowed into each other, forming new shades in real time. The field pulsed with the same rhythm as the music, each beat causing a wave of color to ripple outward. Within this field I could see the outlines of other beings. They were not human in shape, but they had faces that resembled the trees I had seen on the balcony. Their expressions shifted constantly, from melancholy to curiosity to a faint smile. One of them seemed to be looking directly at me, its eyes deep wells of light. When I tried to focus on that being, the field around us brightened, and I felt a surge of understanding pass through me, as if a question I had never asked was answered in an instant. At the same time, a sense of worry rose in my chest. It was a vague anxiety, not tied to any specific thought, but it felt like a dark, heavy cloud pressing against the bright field. As the worry grew, the colors in the field shifted. The bright greens and yellows dimmed, replaced by deep reds and oranges. The music in my ears took on a darker tone, the synths sounding more urgent. I realized that my emotions were directly influencing the visual landscape. When I breathed deeply, the reds softened, the field began to regain its earlier brightness. I tried to keep my breathing steady. Each inhale felt like drawing in the light of the field, each exhale released some of the darkness that had gathered. The presence I sensed earlier seemed to respond to my breath, as if it were a teacher guiding me. It took on the shape of the tree in front of the balcony, its bark now smooth and reflective, its branches forming a crown above my head. The tree's face was solemn, its eyes deep and knowing. It seemed to be saying that my fear was natural, that I was allowed to feel it, but that I should not let it dominate. I remembered my intention. I wanted to see the connections, to understand my place. I focused on that intention, and the field responded. The colors shifted back toward greens and blues, the reds receded, and the music returned to its earlier, more playful tone. The beings in the field smiled, their faces now more relaxed. One of them lifted a hand, and a ribbon of light extended from its fingertips, wrapping around my own form. The ribbon pulsed with each beat of the music, and I felt a sense of unity, as if I were part of a larger tapestry of energy. The sensation of being pulled outward continued, but now it felt more like a gentle glide than a forceful push. I could feel my physical body still present on the balcony, the weight of the chair, the cool night air on my skin, yet my mind was floating above it, observing the scene below like a spectator. I could hear the faint rustle of the Christmas lights, the distant honk of a car, the low murmur of a conversation from the apartment behind me. All these sounds were layered beneath the music, creating a rich soundscape. As the peak of the experience built, I sensed a shift in the field. The patterns became more intricate, spiraling like DNA helices, constantly unwinding and rewinding. They glowed with a soft white light, and each twist seemed to echo a deeper truth. I felt a sudden wave of insight, a flash of understanding that my life, my thoughts, my actions were all part of a larger process. The insight was not a single sentence, but a feeling of being part of a living, breathing whole. At the same time, a new presence entered the scene. It was larger, more imposing, a figure that seemed to embody both creation and destruction. Its face was a mask of many expressions, smiling, angry, compassionate, indifferent. It looked at me with a mixture of amusement and seriousness. I sensed that this consciousness was testing me, watching how I would react to the knowledge I was receiving. It reminded me of the trees on the balcony, their roots tangled in concrete, yet still growing strong. The figure seemed to ask whether I would let my roots be choked by fear, or whether I would reach toward the sky. I felt a sudden surge of energy in my chest, as if a wave of light had crashed into me. It was intense, almost overwhelming, but it also felt like a blessing. The wave washed over the field, turning the colors into a kaleidoscope of shifting hues. The music rose to a crescendo, the beats becoming faster, the synths more urgent. My breath became shallow, my heart hammered, and I felt as if I were riding a storm of pure energy. The storm was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. In the midst of this storm, I caught a glimpse of a familiar scene. It was a memory of a night spent with friends at a dam, a red glow stick being tossed back and forth across the water. The memory was vivid, the sound of the water splashing, the laughter of my friends, the cool night air. The scene blended with the current experience, as if the storm had opened a doorway to past moments. I could see Vlad and Kev, their faces lit by the glow of the stick, their voices echoing in my mind. The memory reminded me of previous journeys, of times when I had felt both fear and relief. The storm continued, the colors shifting with each emotional change. When I felt a pang of anxiety, the field turned a dark red, the music grew heavy. When I let the feeling pass, the colors softened to greens and yellows, the music became lighter. The presence of the tree figure seemed to watch each shift, its expression changing accordingly. When I felt hope, its eyes softened. When I felt doubt, its brow furrowed. I tried to stay present, to observe without becoming lost in the storm. I focused on the breath, on the rhythm of the music, on the intention I had set at the beginning. I reminded myself that I was a witness, that the visions were passing, that I could let them flow without clinging. The field responded, the storm calming slightly, the colors settling into a harmonious blend of blues and purples. The music slowed, each beat resonating like a drum in a quiet hall. In that quiet, I felt a sense of unity with everything around me. The trees on the balcony, the lights, the city, the distant stars, the people I had never met, all seemed to be part of one vast network. I could sense the flow of energy moving through each point, connecting them like a river. I felt my own energy as a thread in that river, moving, bending, merging, then separating again. It was a feeling of being both distinct and part of the whole. The presence that had taken the shape of a tree spoke without words. It seemed to convey that I was at a threshold, that I could either stay within this comfort or push further into the unknown. It offered a gentle nudge, as if encouraging me to it offered a gentle nudge, as if encouraging me to step beyond the edge of the balcony and into the space that lay just beyond the edge of sight. I feel the impulse rise in my chest, a warm pressure that pushes my breath deeper, as if the air itself were thickening. My hand trembles not from fear but from an eager need to follow the invitation. I let the music swell, the low synths rising like a tide, and I feel my body melt into the chair, the seat becoming a point of release rather than a restraint. At the moment I let go, the world splits. The city lights that had seemed distant become a lattice of bright threads, each one pulsing with a rhythm that matches the beat in my ears. The two trees that had stood across from me now expand beyond their bark, their trunks widening into columns of light that reach up and out, their leaves turning into thousands of tiny mirrors that flicker and spin. The blue-purple sky opens like a curtain, revealing a field of stars that pulse in unison with the music. The colors shift from deep indigo to bright turquoise, then to a warm amber, each change matching a breath I take without thinking about it. I am no longer on the balcony. I am inside the space between the two luminous trunks, suspended in a void that feels both empty and full. I can sense the presence of the tree-like being that had spoken without words. Its shape flickers between a massive oak and a crystalline spire, its bark now a surface of pulsing light. It does not speak, but I feel its intent clearly. Go further. The gentle nudge becomes a gentle push, and I feel my consciousness stretch outward, like a rubber band being pulled from my core toward the periphery of the space. My sense of self expands. I can see my own outline, thin and translucent, stretching outward like a ribbon that wraps around the trunks and then stretches out into the surrounding field. The ribbon touches other ribbons, each one belonging to a different consciousness that I can sense but not name. I can feel their emotions, their memories, their present thoughts. A friend I have not seen in years appears as a bright pulse, his laughter echoing in the background like a distant drum. A stranger's fear passes through me like a cold gust, but it is quickly balanced by a wave of gratitude from a mother who holds her child. All of these sensations mingle in a way that feels like a conversation without words. I notice that the space is not static. Pulses of light ripple outward from the central point where the two trees meet, forming concentric circles that expand and contract. Each pulse carries a different tone, and as the tones combine, they create a chord that reverberates through my entire being. I feel a pressure at the base of my skull, as if the chord is resonating with the very fibers of my brain. My eyes are closed, yet I see colors that have no name. They swirl in patterns that remind me of the way water spirals down a drain, but the patterns are alive, constantly shifting, never repeating. The colors pulse to the beat of the music, and I find myself moving in time with them, my breath matching their rhythm. The feeling of unity deepens. I sense a thread that runs from my heart through the central trunk of the tree and out into the far reaches of this luminous field. That thread connects to a point that looks like a planet, a swirling sphere of blues and greens. The planet spins, and as it does, I feel the motion in my own veins. I understand without words that I am part of a larger pattern that repeats endlessly. I am both a single point and a part of an endless pattern. A sudden shift occurs. The gentle push becomes a forceful thrust. The presence that had guided me now appears as a cluster of eyes, each one glowing with a different hue. The eyes look at me, not with judgment, but with an invitation. A wave of heat rushes through my chest, and I feel my heart beat faster, each beat echoing like a drum in a cavern. I feel the urge to break through a barrier that I did not know existed. I push against it, and the barrier cracks, revealing a tunnel of pure light that stretches beyond the horizon. I step into the tunnel. The walls are made of pure energy, humming with a frequency that resonates with my bones. The tunnel is narrow, but I feel no claustrophobia. Instead, I feel a sense of focus. The light inside the tunnel is not blinding. It is gentle, like the glow of a sunrise filtered through a thin veil. As I move forward, I notice that the tunnel is not empty. Small shapes float within it, geometric patterns that rotate and interlock. Some look like triangles, others like hexagons, all moving in perfect synchrony. The patterns pulse with the same rhythm that the music provides, and each pulse seems to reinforce my sense of being part of something larger. The tunnel opens into a vast chamber. The chamber is filled with a multitude of beings that I cannot fully describe. Some appear as luminous humanoid forms, others as clusters of light that shift and swirl. Their faces are serene, their eyes full of compassion. One of them steps forward, its form shimmering like liquid mercury. It places a hand, or what I interpret as a hand, on my forehead. The contact is warm, and I feel a flood of information flow into my mind. I see a series of images, a river flowing through a canyon, a child laughing, an old tree shedding its leaves, a city at night with lights flickering like fireflies. The images are not random. They are linked by a thread of meaning that I grasp at but cannot fully articulate. In that moment I realize that the presence is not a single entity but a collection of many aspects, each one reflecting a different facet of existence. The gentle nudge that began the experience was only one aspect. The stern push, the watchful eyes, the guiding hand, all are parts of a whole that is both larger than the sum of its parts and intimately connected to me. I understand that I am being shown how the pieces fit together, not as separate entities, but as interlocking parts of a single structure. The feeling of awe is overwhelming. My body, which still exists somewhere on the balcony, feels light, as if it is made of feathers. I am aware of my physical breath, each inhalation feeling like pulling in fresh mountain air, each exhalation releasing a sense of release. My heart feels like a drum that is both beating and resonating with the cosmic drum that I hear in the background. The music has shifted now. The melody is softer, more melodic, like a choir of voices humming in unison. The chords are warm, and they seem to hold my entire experience together. I linger in this state for what feels like an eternity, yet it is only a few moments. Presence communicates that it is time to return, that the work here is complete for now. The canon of the form changes again. The glowing beings begin to fade, the light in the tunnel dims, and the tunnel itself begins to contract. I feel a gentle tug at the thread that connects me to the central point of the tree. The tug is not painful. It is a gentle reminder that I must return to my body, to the world that is still waiting. I begin to move backward, through the tunnel, back into the space between the two luminous trees. The trees appear once more in their full glory, but now their bark glows with a softer hue, as if they have been touched by the same light that filled the chamber. The presence that had guided me appears again as a single tree, its branches reaching out to cradle me. I feel the presence hand, now gentle, press against my chest, as if to steady my heart. I feel my breath become deeper, more controlled, as if the presence is guiding my breath back into a rhythm that matches the world below. The transition is smooth. I feel my spirit, which had felt like a thread stretched across the universe, gently fold back into my physical form. The sensation is like a wave receding on a shore. The water recedes, leaving the sand wet, but the sand remains. I feel the weight of my body return, the sensation of my feet on the balcony floor, the cool night air on my skin. My ears once again pick up the distant hum of the city, the faint sound of traffic far below, the occasional bark of a dog. My iPod continues to play Shpongle's Behind Closed Eyelids, but now the music feels like a gentle echo of the cosmic chorus I have just witnessed. I open my eyes. The balcony is still there, the city lights still glitter, the trees still stand. The white Christmas lights that wrap around the railing are now brighter, as if they have absorbed some of the light from the experience. I sit there, breathing slowly, feeling the cool breeze against my face. My heart is still beating strongly, but there is a new rhythm that matches the inner rhythm I felt during the peak. I am aware of a faint afterglow that radiates from my chest, a warm glow that seems to pulse with each breath. The plateau begins. The intensity of the peak fades, but the sense of connection does not disappear. I feel the presence still nearby, like a gentle hum at the edge of hearing. The colors in my visual field have settled into a soft gradient of blues and greens, like the afterglow of a sunrise. The music continues, each beat still resonating in my bones, but now it feels more like a background hum rather than a driving force. I notice that my thoughts are still clear. The usual chatter that fills my mind is quieter, more measured. I find myself remembering details from the experience with clarity. The shape of the tree, the feeling of the thread, the image of the river, the faces of the luminous beings. Each memory feels vivid, as if I could reach out and touch it. I feel a desire to record these details, to put them into words while the clarity remains. I reach for my phone, but I do not open any app. I simply sit, letting the memory settle. The feeling of unity remains present, but it is now more subtle. I sense the connection to the other consciousnesses I sensed earlier, but it feels like a background network rather than a foreground display. I am aware that I can still sense the faint presence of the friend who had sent a laugh across time, the mother's gratitude, the stranger's fear. I feel these as gentle currents that flow through me, not overwhelming but constant. The sense that I am part of a larger whole is still present, but it now feels like a steady undercurrent rather than a wave. I notice a change in my emotional state. The earlier fear that had crept in when I thought about death and the unknown has dissolved. It has been replaced by a calm acceptance, a sense that whatever comes next is part of the same pattern. I notice a smile forming on my face as I think about the absurdity of fearing the unknown when I have just seen the boundless possibilities that exist beyond it. I feel a deep gratitude for the experience, for the guidance, for the chance to see beyond the veil. The plateau continues for several minutes. The physical sensations are subtle. My fingertips feel a gentle tingling, as if tiny currents are still flowing beneath the skin. My muscles feel relaxed, but there is a subtle tension that reminds me that I am still alive, still in a body. The taste of the night air is fresh, almost sweet, like the first sip of water after a long run. The smell of the city, a mixture of exhaust and distant food vendors, is present but softened by the lingering sweetness of the afterglow. I realize that I am beginning to think about the practical implications of what I have seen. The image of the spiral galaxy, the river, the city lights, all of these are symbols of flow and connection. I think about how my daily actions might affect the larger network. I recall the phrase I heard in the vision. We are each creating everything we experience. I feel a responsibility to align my actions with that insight. I resolve silently to be more mindful of how I speak, how I treat others, how I use my resources.